Nobody expected it. The federal courthouse in Manhattan fell dead silent when Janice Combs, 83-year-old mother of Sean Diddy Combs, was escorted to the witness stand. Diddy, who had kept his cool throughout the entire trial, suddenly tensed up. His lawyers exchanged anxious glances. The prosecution sat straighter. This was the moment everything would change. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. We bring you honest, in-depth reporting on high-profile trials you won't find anywhere else. No one thought Diddy's own mother would testify. The courtroom was already thick with tension from a turbulent day. All eyes followed the elderly woman as she slowly made her way forward. The moment she was sworn in, audible gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the judge looked stunned. There had been no prior notice. Just Janice Combs, the woman who had stood by her son through decades of fame and scandal, now ready to speak under oath. Up until now, Diddy had looked confident, calmly going over notes with his team and flashing smiles at his supporters. But the moment his mother took the stand, his most loyal defender, everything shifted. Maybe it was the realization that the one person who knew him better than anyone else was about to speak. Maybe it was the awareness that his whole defense might collapse. He wasn't sitting there as a celebrity anymore. He was a son, watching. His mother prepared to tell the truth about him. And when Janice Combs opened her mouth to speak, no one in that courtroom was ready for what she was about to reveal. Her private conversations with her son, her rising concerns over the years. What she said wouldn't just damage his case, it would be a mother's emotional reckoning with the man her son had become. The day had started like any other. Reporters murmured, lawyers huddled, and the room hummed with nervous energy as everyone waited. Then the prosecutor said, "The United States calls Janice Combs." The room went still. Some thought it was a mistake, others assumed it was a desperate move. But as Janice walked to the stand, back straight, eyes calm, everyone knew it was real. The judge raised an eyebrow. Diddy, who had been flipping through documents, froze. His face went pale. His hands stopped mid-motion. Janice sat down without looking at anyone, not even her son, who now stared at her like she'd betrayed him. "Mrs. Combs, thank you for being here," the prosecutor began gently. "I know how difficult this must be." Janice gave a small nod. Her composure was impressive under the weight of it all, and from that point on, the entire direction of the trial changed, because this wasn't some tabloid headline. It wasn't speculation or hearsay from an ex-employee. It was the testimony of the woman who had raised Diddy, who had defended him, celebrated his wins, and now was telling the world she couldn't stay silent anymore. His lawyer jumped up to object, claiming the testimony violated family privilege and would prejudice the jury. But the prosecutor argued there's no such legal privilege between a mother and adult son, not when potential criminal activity is involved. The judge agreed. Janice could continue. And then, silence. Reporters stopped typing. Even sketch artists paused. Diddy's family looked shell-shocked. The prosecution stayed composed. Janice adjusted her glasses and spoke directly to the prosecutor. "I've been asked to talk about conversations I've had with my son and things I've seen that concern me. I'm here because the truth must be told, even if it hurts." A murmur spread. Diddy's lawyer tried to interrupt again, but Diddy grabbed his sleeve, signaling him to sit down. It was like he already knew what was coming. The prosecutor approached carefully, aware of Janice's age and emotional burden. "Mrs. Combs, can you describe your relationship with your son?" Janice inhaled deeply. "I raised Sean alone after his father was murdered. I worked multiple jobs to provide for him, to give him what I never had. I wanted him to succeed, and he did. He surpassed every dream I had." She smiled faintly, remembering his early drive. He was always charismatic. Even as a boy, he could charm anyone. But her smile faded. Somewhere along the way, things changed. She turned slightly to the jury. Success came so fast, and suddenly everyone was saying yes to him. Everyone treated him like the rules didn't apply. And I think he started to believe that. The prosecutor gently moved into the early 2000s, when Diddy was at the height of his power. Janice described how she noticed changes: controlling behavior, bursts of anger, a disregard for boundaries. At first, I thought it was stressful, where the industry is ruthless, but then I started hearing things, seeing things. She recalled a 2008 visit to his Miami home. I came unannounced. Mothers can do that, she said, earning nervous chuckles. There had been a party. The staff looked panicked, not just busy. One girl was crying. A guard was escorting her out. Sean was furious I showed up. Then the prosecutor held up a photo. Do you recognize this? She nodded. That's the pool house at his LA home. Around 2010, he turned it into a studio, but he never let me in. That was new. I was always welcome before. Her concerns grew. She raised questions. Mothers do that too, she said, firmer now. But he brushed me off, told me I didn't understand, that it was all consensual, part of the industry. Did your son ever discuss the allegations made against him? The prosecutor asked. Yes, Janice said. When the first accusations came out in 2017, I called him right away. I asked if they were true. He said the women were lying and wanted money, that this happens to all successful men. She paused. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. He's my son. Did that change? Yes, she whispered. After Cassie filed her lawsuit in 2023, I confronted him again. We were alone. I told him I needed to hear the truth, not the lawyer-approved version. Just the truth, mother to son. The courtroom froze. He was different that day, tired. The mask slipped. He didn't confess everything, but he said something I can't forget. Mom, you don't build what I built by playing by the rules. Sometimes people get hurt. That's business. Her voice cracked. That's not how I raised him. That's not business. Diddy stared at the table. His lawyers scribbled notes and whispered, but he didn't react. Janice pressed on. She said that in early 2024, after the hotel hallway video of Diddy attacking Cassie went public, she called him. I was devastated. I asked him, how could you do that? He told her it was a rough time, that it was just one moment taken out of context. Did you believe him? The prosecutor asked. No, Janice said. Not anymore. I had seen that rage, not toward me, but at staff, at associates. That man in the video wasn't a stranger, and that broke my heart. She went on to describe how the accusations formed a pattern. She recalled finding lists in his office, names of women, notes like handled or potential problem. When I asked, he took the paper from me and said it was business. But the look in his eyes, I knew. Mothers know. The prosecutor showed her another document. Do you recognize this? She nodded. These are notes I began keeping. I had to write everything down. Conversations, events. I was afraid my love for him was clouding my judgment, but writing it out made the pattern clear. And what I saw terrified me. Diddy finally looked up. For the first time, he met his mother's eyes. It was brief, but powerful. Pain, betrayal, and maybe understanding passed silently between them. Janice turned back to the prosecutor. I love my son. That won't change. But I can't pretend anymore. I can't stay silent. Too many people have been hurt. Mrs. Combs, I want to ask about a conversation you had with your son this past April, after his arrest, but before the trial, the prosecutor said. Janice sat up straighter. Yes, I visited him at the detention center. They made special, arrangements because of who he is. It was just us. She continued, I told him, Sean, I'm your mother. I love you unconditionally, but I need to know the truth before I keep supporting you. The courtroom was still. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, the truth is, I built a world where I made the rules, where what I wanted happened, where people either went along or got pushed out. Was it always right? No. Did people get hurt? Yes. But that's how power works, Ma. That's how it's always worked. She paused, collecting herself. I asked about the parties, the videos, the drugs, the threats. I needed him to deny it if it wasn't true. Did he deny it? The prosecutor asked. No, Janice replied softly. He said it was complicated, that everything started as consensual, that no one was forced. But once people were inside that world, the lines blurred. Sometimes they changed their minds. But by then, they'd already taken the money, the opportunities. Her hands shook. I told him consent obtained through fear, pressure, intoxication. That's not real consent. And he looked me in the eyes and said, that's not how it works, in my world. At the defense table, Diddy's lawyers looked alarmed. One slid a note to him. He didn't look. He kept his eyes locked on his mother. The prosecutor asked gently, did your son ever explicitly admit to the crimes he's charged with? Janice said, not in those exact words, but he said enough for me to understand the truth. The system I built worked for years. Everyone got what they wanted. It only became a problem when people decided to change the rules. Janice Combs looked directly at the jury as she spoke. I raised my son to take responsibility for his actions, to be accountable. When he told me what he had done, I knew he had lost his way. He wasn't seeing people as people anymore, just as pieces in a game he thought he controlled. The prosecutor then introduced a new exhibit, a personal letter Janice had written to her son after that visit. In it, she expressed her unwavering love, but also deep disappointment and a clear refusal to continue defending behavior she now saw as destructive. Did you receive a response to this letter? The prosecutor asked. Yes, she replied. Sean called me. He was angry at first, then almost pleading. He said I didn't understand what was at stake, that everything he'd built was on the line. I told him, that's exactly why I had to tell the truth, because lives were at stake, not just his. The prosecutor leaned forward. Mrs. Combs, what brought you here today? Why did you agree to testify? Janice took a deep breath. Because the truth matters. Because accountability matters. Because I raised my son to be better than this. And because I believe real love, a mother's love, means wanting your child to face consequences so they can become better, not shielding them and watching them become worse. She looked at her son again, this time longer. I'm here because I love him enough to tell the truth about him, even when that truth hurts. I'm here because the women who were hurt deserve someone to acknowledge their pain. And I'm here because Sean needs to understand that no amount of money, fame, or power places you above basic human decency. As Janice spoke, something in Diddy's demeanor broke. His shoulders sagged, and the carefully controlled mask of confidence crumbled. For the first time in the trial, he no longer looked like a powerful mogul, but a son reckoning with his mother's disappointment. The prosecutor thanked her, and the defense began cross-examination. But the tone was gentle, respectful. The attorney did not try to discredit her, instead focusing on the fact that her testimony was based on conversations and impressions, not first-hand observation. Janice remained calm throughout, acknowledging what she hadn't seen but standing by what she knew. Her son had built a system that hurt people, and had admitted as much to her. As she left the witness stand, she paused once more, her eyes meeting her son's. No words were spoken, but the moment was filled with decades of love, sorrow, and a sliver of hope. She walked out of the courtroom with her back straight, her dignity intact. Diddy watched her go, and something in his expression made it clear. Of all the testimony the jury had heard, hers had cut the deepest. The mask had fallen. The truth stood between mother and son. Next, the prosecution called Dr. Margaret Chen, a family psychology expert specializing in cases involving high-profile figures. After verifying her credentials, the prosecutor asked what the court had just witnessed. Extraordinary, Dr. Chen said. In cases involving the rich and famous, family members usually stay silent or offer blind support. Mrs. Combs broke that pattern. What we saw was a moral tipping point. Her gradual realization lends credibility. She didn't wake up one day. She watched over years. The prosecutor asked about the psychological dynamics Janice described, how her son dismissed her concerns, justified his actions as business, and believed he was above rules. Dr. Chen explained these were classic signs of power insulation, when someone surrounded by yes men loses grip on reality. A mother is often the last person who can pierce that illusion, she said. She knew him before the money and fame. Dr. Chen reviewed Janice's notes, spanning 2008 to 2024, and highlighted how her interpretations evolved. Early entries gave him the benefit of the doubt, while later ones saw the same actions as manipulative and dangerous. This shift, Chen said, demonstrates a pattern that aligns with coercive power structures. She placed Janice's insight into the broader context, showing how even loved ones can reach a breaking point when the truth becomes too painful to ignore. Throughout her testimony, Diddy remained quiet, occasionally whispering to his lawyers, but mostly staring at the table. The confident man who once lit up court appearances had vanished, replaced by someone visibly unraveling. During cross-examination, the defense questioned Dr. Chen on the general nature of her analysis, suggesting she lacked direct knowledge of the family. She agreed, but defended her conclusions, pointing out that the behavior matched well-established psychological patterns. As Dr. Chen stepped down, the emotional impact of Janice's words still hung in the courtroom. Jurors who had remained stone-faced during disturbing testimony now wiped tears, took heavy notes, and seemed deeply moved. After a recess, the mood had shifted entirely. Sources near the defense said Diddy refused to speak during the break. The prosecution was seen adjusting their strategy. Judge Subramanian addressed the court. "Does either side wish to make a motion?" Diddy's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we request a brief continuance to reassess our position." It was unexpected this late in the trial. The prosecutor objected, but the judge granted a delay until the next morning. That evening, headlines exploded. Mother's testimony shakes Diddy trial. Legal experts called it a major blow to the defense. When court resumed, the gallery was packed. Before testimony could resume, Diddy's attorney stood again. "Your Honor, after consultation, Mr. Combs wishes to address the court." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The prosecutor immediately objected, but the judge ruled, "If Mr. Combs wishes to speak, it must be from the stand under oath and subject to cross-examination." All eyes turned to Diddy. He stood slowly. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand and agree." Until now, most assumed he would never testify. His decision shocked even his own legal team. Sworn in, he took the stand in a simple dark suit. No flash, no swagger. His attorney began. "Mr. Combs, why are you testifying today?" "I listened to my mother yesterday. Really listened. And I realized I've been hiding from the truth for so long, I almost believed my own lies," he said, voice low and raw. "My mother raised me better. She taught me about respect, about integrity. Somewhere along the way, I forgot." The attorney hesitated, then asked, "Can you explain your understanding of the charges?" Diddy replied, "I understand I'm facing serious crimes, racketeering, sex trafficking, coercion. I used to tell myself it was just business. Everyone agreed. But that wasn't true. I created an environment where people couldn't say no, where the threat of losing everything hung over them. I called it leverage, but it was wrong," he admitted, to creating a world where staff existed to enable and cover up whatever he wanted. NDAs, payoffs, threats. He used them all. "I told myself if they took the money, it meant consent. But I ignored the power imbalance. Real consent wasn't possible for many of them." When asked about specific accusations, he mostly confirmed the victims' stories. He also admitted that substance use blurred his memory. His attorney, clearly rattled, asked about his mother's testimony. "Was she accurate?" "Yes," Diddy said. "She never lied to me. She told the truth yesterday. I told her those things. I was still defending myself back then, but I see now I was wrong. The prosecutor rose for cross. Mr. Combs, you described a system where people couldn't freely consent. Do you understand that this aligns with the legal definitions of the crimes you're charged with? Yes, he replied. I've had time to reflect, to study law. I understand now. And yet, you initially pleaded not guilty. What changed? Diddy looked to the empty seat where his mother had sat. Yesterday happened. Hearing my mother speak the truth I've denied for so long, it broke something in me. The last defense I had was believing those who loved me would always protect me. I wasn't the monster the prosecution portrayed, but hearing my mother testify stripped that illusion away. The prosecutor's questions became more pointed, guiding Diddy through each criminal charge, sex trafficking, racketeering, and others, extracting answers that aligned with the legal definitions. By the end of cross-examination, Diddy looked drained and defeated. His testimony didn't defend him. It strengthened the prosecution's case. As he stepped down from the stand, he paused, scanning the courtroom filled with reporters, victims, spectators, and family. It looked like he might say something, but instead he quietly returned to his seat. The judge called a recess. As the courtroom cleared, Diddy remained frozen, staring straight ahead. The man who built an empire on charm had just dismantled it with his own words. After the break, Diddy's lawyers shocked the courtroom by requesting a private meeting with the prosecution and judge. 30 minutes later, the judge announced, "The defendant wishes to change his plea. Before we proceed, I must ensure this is being done knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily." In a careful back and forth, the judge confirmed Diddy understood the rights he was waiving and the penalties he faced. Asked if anyone coerced him, Diddy shook his head. "No, Your Honor. This is my decision." He added, "After hearing my mother and facing the truth of my actions, I can't keep denying responsibility." The judge accepted the plea and set sentencing for 6 weeks later. Survivors who testified watched silently, some holding hands, some in tears. What was expected to be a drawn-out trial had ended suddenly, with a mother's voice and a son's long-delayed truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Janice Combs made a brief but powerful statement. "This is a painful day, but a necessary one. I love my son unconditionally, but love without truth isn't real. I hope this is the start of healing for Shah, for his victims, and for our family." As Diddy was taken into custody, his final public moment before sentencing, he no longer looked like the confident mogul behind a billion-dollar empire. He looked like a man who had abused his power and finally admitted it. When Sean Diddy Combs pleaded guilty, he didn't look defeated. He looked like someone who had finally accepted the truth. The courtroom was still. Even the judge paused before continuing the procedural steps. Some jurors, dismissed without deliberating, had tears in their eyes. And for the first time since his arrest, Diddy looked relieved, not of guilt, but of the denial he'd carried for so long. Diddy made no statement to the press. He was taken into custody immediately. His legal team issued a brief note. "Mr. Combs has accepted responsibility. He asks for privacy for his family during this time and expresses deep remorse to those harmed." But outside, the world was just beginning to respond. The music industry, which had been cautious at first, now had to face the reality of his confession. Record labels issued statements condemning abuse of power. Artists distanced themselves, some shocked, others admitting they'd heard whispers, but weren't sure what to believe. Behind closed doors, companies held emergency meetings. Contracts were reviewed, projects canceled, partnerships severed. While some painted Diddy as a lone predator, the internet began connecting dots, suggesting a deeper problem. Old interviews resurfaced, past event footage was re-examined, and most significantly, other victims across the industry began coming forward. Fans weren't just stunned, they were introspective. Many admitted guilt for supporting Diddy despite years of rumors. Others asked why it took a mother's tearful testimony to pierce the protection that wealth and fame had built. The era of blind celebrity worship was showing cracks. 6 weeks. Later, at sentencing, Janice Combs sat in the front row. She watched as victims shared impact statements, how Diddy's actions damaged their careers, trust, and self-worth. When given the chance to speak, Diddy addressed the court. "I want to apologize to everyone I've hurt, to the women I betrayed, to the colleagues I involved, to my children who now carry this legacy, and to my mother who raised me to be better." His voice was steady, humbled. "I can't undo the pain I've caused. I can only admit to it,